All right, I am here with Pullhammer Supremacy, aka Troy, and Jacob, both of the people who worked on Pullhammer.net. And I just want to get right started and ask, what made you guys want to create Pullhammer.net?
So, as a day one player, if you're logging into the game for the first time and you're looking at a weapon selection screen, you're seeing a bunch of misinformation. It's just not a good representation of how the weapons actually relate to each other. This first picture is a great example. Every single stat is essentially misrepresented. Every single weapon on that screen is basically misrepresented. So if you're playing footman, if you're playing poleman, and you're picking a weapon, it's not necessarily how it displays on the screen. So, for example, the glaive, when you're looking at reach, is longer than the halberd. For a noob, you might be hours in and you keep losing a matchup, and you don't understand why, because they seem to be outranging you, but wait, you should have a longer weapon than them, or they're faster than you, but wait, you thought you picked the faster weapon. There's just not an answer to why am I losing this matchup, and it's because the weapon you're holding isn't necessarily as represented in the game.
So tell me about what we're looking at here.
So this was just a Reddit post we made quite a while ago. I want to say about 6 months or a year ago, just to kind of highlight that problem. This first screen, I think we're looking at range, and you can see the halberd is that orange. It's definitely not the longest. It's inside those other boxes. So you're looking at all the range values for cut, slash, stab, and overhead, and their alts. This last screen, not a great visual representation, but what we're trying to show here is that the damage values are also different than what's on this first page. So it's, yeah, essentially this, you could do this to any subclass. You could look at the weapons available to any subclass and see how they're represented by those little yellow bars on the screen, and see that they're disproportionate to their actual range, their actual speed, and their actual damage.
Yeah, so in summary, the in game bars are incorrect.
Straight up misinformation.
And
And
not even to a small degree. Like, they're inaccurate to crazy degrees. Well, you'll have like two weapons that are just variants of each other, and one's the faster one and one's the slower one, but the bars misrepresent them as the slower one being faster and the faster one being
absolutely.
slower.
But yeah, we could go on and on. We could have a whole nother hour-long discussion about Torn Banner and its problems. But unless you had any other questions about that page, I wanted to go on to some of the inspiration. And this goes back almost a quarter century. If you played Pokemon, you might have had this book growing up, 1999. And it basically showed the first 151 Pokemon, or maybe it was just the first 150. But you see that radar chart in the middle right of the screen. And that was kind of the original inspiration, is like, man, those bars suck. They're awful. Yeah, just some childhood inspiration there, something that I've always thought was a cool display method.
We actually made some of these like type of charts for the competitive players to rate different aspects about their gameplay to show them where they need improvement.
Oh, like a player rating system. That's really
Yes,
cool.
and I'll go ahead and put some of those on screen now.
Very cool.
Yeah, and we worked on these, and we thought
Dude,
that
the
they were.
visuals, you got people's skins on there.
Yeah,
Dude,
yeah.
whoever helped you with this,
Oh, I made them myself.
oh, they look awesome, Dave. Those are really cool. Yeah, but the other inspiration, just to shout out to another medieval themed game, Spirit of the Law. This guy's been doing it for more than 10 years. I think his YouTube channel just shows 10 years. This is a 24-year-old game. Microsoft is still putting out updates for it. It's an RTS, so your StarCraft type game. But this guy does civilization versus civilization, tech versus tech, unit versus unit, DPS, timing, pathfinding, just the most insane analysis that no normal person would ever think to do. The guy is amazing. Anyways, just wanted to shout out another creator. So those were kind of the inspirations for this. People that, take a game, really grab hold of it, really try to understand it, and not necessarily like define any meta or um, tell people how to play, but rather just kind of like enlighten people what's going on there, like under the code with the numbers. So this first video, King Louis, he does Bannerlord, he does Mordhauer, he does Chivalry 2, all that slasher genre, medieval genre stuff. 2 years and I think 3 or 4, yeah, 2 days, 2 years and 4 days ago, he posted this video and he posted this original damage spreadsheet. So if you were playing Chivalry 2 way back then, over 2 years ago, this was your resource out of game to look at damage stats. And this was obviously the easiest thing to gather, really tedious, Like literally, you just play the game and write some values in. So wanted to highlight King Louis for that initial set of data, which kind of inspired that first year of work
Building blocks.
towards. Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of what we're looking at here. Is just all the building blocks here. This was this was part two. This was part two of PullHammer.net. I Platyplism is like a third of that website. If you ever think you benefit from this stuff, Platyplism is the guy who went in and figured out how long weapons are on all their attacks, on all their alts. He has a repeatable scientific method that you can go do in game. The way he did this, and I'm just going to quote Platyplism, I measured these values by striking the tip of the spinning traps on tournament grounds until I was pushed out of range by the slight knockback you receive when landing a successful hit. So each knockback he gets for each hit on that target ends up being a unit of one Joffrey, and we'll get into why we call it a Joffrey later. Any successful hit on an enemy, wall, or environment object inflicts a very small amount of knockback to the attacker. The unit is essentially hits needed to be pushed out of range compared to other weapons. So that unit stays the same regardless of what weapon you're using. So when you're out of range, you know that your last hit was the max range. And I originally used the range of the spear stab as the starting value to compare the others to. I attacked the tip of the spinning traps in tournament ground to make sure the results were as accurate as possible. Yeah, since it has a small hitbox collider, that is easier to center the rectile on. So that's exactly what he's doing. So what came out of that March 21st post from Platyplism is overnight, and Dave, I don't know, a year plus ago what the competitive community thought or what the more seasoned people thought, but that was a major misconception cleared overnight that, hold on, glaive is longer than halberd. Uh, it, People still say that to me. It was a post like a week or two ago where a guy's looking at a stat analysis of ours and was blown away. He's like, wait, the halberd isn't longer than the glaive? No. Glaive has always been longer than the halberd, regardless of how the game stats lie about it. And then another major basically discovery that came out of Platyplism's post was normal and alt attacks often differ. So Polehammer and Halberd Slash are both good examples of that. I think Polehammer's 5 Joffrey shorter and the Halberd's 6 Joffrey shorter on its alt slash. And the Halberd slashes are still longer. But regardless, you have this one super long slash that you feel like you can just take out crowds with. And then you have this like stubby thing that whiffs. And it's not really stubby. It's still a pretty long attack. But when you just hit this guy way over there and then your second attack doesn't even come close to him, it's very weird. So
Yes,
that
it's
was
something that without being told, you normally wouldn't think. You normally would not.
right.
Yeah, the game does not suggest to you that alternate attacks could be actually fundamentally different. You would just
Right.
expect them to be the same attack, but mirrored.
And
But
I
it's
don't
not.
right. So if you're interested in that stuff, if you want to know like what's my weapon's longest attack, should I be trying to throw the all stab or the alt overhead? Is that actually a better option? Uh that's what the website's for. Take your favorite weapon, go look at it. Don't do any comparisons to other weapon. Just go find out what the best attacks are on your favorite weapons. That's a really important thing that the game cannot do for you. And if you were to try to do on your own using game information, you'd be misled. But yeah, can't say enough about Platyplism. I consider him a third of this project, even though he's not super active in it. He's just given these awesome stats, this awesome method. Jacob, if you want to go on to that next post, as far as coining the Jeffrey method, it was literally a Reddit user asking, "What's the measurement unit for this?" and someone else answering Joffrey's, and then Platyplism being like, "Yep, that's it. We're using that as the unit of measurement." I was super inspired by this. I was super fired up by Platyplism getting this second third to us, and I wanted to work on what in my mind was the third, where we'd have damage. Platyplism just gave us range, and I want to get speed. And we did not have good methods, honestly. If you want to show that Reddit post, Jacob, these are wind-up speeds I think I'd gotten for two-handed weapons. Again, just about 2 or 3. It would have been just about 2 weeks after Platyplism's post that I sit down and I grind this out. Go ahead and show them our rig, Jacob. So This is a MAME cabinet. I think it's from the late 90s. Jacob thinks it's from the mid thousands, but anyways, it's really old. Our dad made it. The idea is that you run whatever game you want on it, but we've kind of Frankensteined it just into a normal PC terminal situation. And this was actually at another house we lived at, hooked up to a Xbox One from 2013. But I fire that thing up, have a capture card over to this PC in the arcade, and we record in OBS. I'm in offline mode. I'm on tournament grounds. There's no network lag. I think I'm actually using a wired controller to try to eliminate any input lag. I don't think it matters how I was recording anyways, but the idea is that go up to the targets, kind of inspired by Platypusm's Joffrey method, and I'm swinging on the targets and watching for when that target sparks and starts moving. And I do that 2 or 3 times for each attack. We're running at 30 frames per second. We're on this old ass Xbox One. I get all this loaded up in OBS, and I go back and I play it back frame by frame in VLC. So I'm literally just sitting there hitting the space bar. And I'm watching when the animation starts, which coincides with the stand bar starting to drain. And I'm counting frames up until I see the sparks come off the weapon. I see the target make that first frame of movement, registering that first hit. And that's how we get frame data for windup. Not really a good representation of windup, though, because what we're measuring there is windup plus like half of the release phase, like half of the time that release is open so that it can get to the center of the screen. So it's more of like a time to hit measurement. It's really not accurate. So that was my personal contribution to the stats gathering, and it is totally obsolete now. That windup data is not usable anymore. It was not great at the time, but we'll get onto that here at the end of the presentation where we talk about modern Pullhammer stats. Yeah, that third was there, and that's kind of what we've operated off of for over a year now. So now it's later in April 2022. So we're pretty active on Reddit right now, trying to get the conversation started, trying to suss out some conversation on this weapon stats. And for the first time, we're able to post windup speed, attack range, and damage values, and then kind of bundle it all up in a little color graded summary there in those middle columns, and kind of rank everything together for the first time. And notice I'm not trying to give an overall rank there. I'm not trying to like rate or rank the weapons. It's just, hey, these are the averages of the range and the damage and the speed. And this is the first time we have it where it's a pretty good representation of the range. It's the actual in-game damage because they're just values on screen. And then with my new speed method, we at least know how long it typically takes to get a hit out, at least to the middle of the screen abouts. Here we did rankings. So if you want to look for the Easter egg below the actual data, here's where we actually rank everything by those average values. And this is way long ago. This is 14 months ago. And for some reason, even there, the analyses we're doing are showing weapons like Pullhammer, Heavy Mace, Halberd as top 3. So even though that analysis isn't perfect, even though it's not based on perfect information, that first 2/3 of it, damage and range, are pretty perfect. And the speed at least gave us an idea of what windup was. And that's kind of in what we've been basing analysis on for the past year plus. Let's look at these weapon performance radar charts. So again, I get this itch, this calling from childhood to go back to my JRPG, my Pokemon roots, and I want to be able to visually look at weapons and overlap them and see. I want to see the shape of a weapon, essentially. And this is a post from late April, right after we had put everything together, that puts damage, range, and speed together, and you're able to see these different weapons kind of compared to each other for the first time. So it's just something I had kind of always wanted to put out as a visual, and for the first time had the data to do it. And then this guy named Aardvark slides in, and he likes our radar charts, and he wants to make a visualizer. He wants to make a calculator. He thinks he can make radars reactive, and he did it. And this is one of the very first iterations of Pullhammer.net. It is a far cry from the modern website. It is reactive. It does do a lot of the core functions that the modern website does, but it's missing a lot of categories. It's imperfect data. doesn't have all the weapons.
Target selector doesn't work.
Yeah. So, but this guy Aardvark, he did this. He built this core component, this very first tab of what's become like 3 different visualizers on Polehammer.net. And yeah, he basically said, "Hey, I developed some stuff. I liked your radar charts." And he put this out on a Webify page. So we didn't even have the .net lockdown yet. The Polehammer.net meme had not fully formed at this point, but his contribution was just basically the catalyst to us like jumping up to this next level, to being like, nope, we're buying a domain, we're making this tool public, we're spamming it until people, take a look and start helping us with this project, and it's eventually come to fruition. Getting into some early analysis, April 18th of 2022. So this is actually going back a little bit before we had the website up even, but we had just put those comprehensive weapon stats together. And we made the observation that basically, why is the Warhammer as fast as it is? Like, why is the Warhammer basically a maul that you get a shield with that's just kind of stubby? And, well, hold on, the maul's already really stubby. So yeah, give me that shield. And it was just kind of like, why would I ever pick up another weapon? The Warhammer just slapped back then. So we basically went to Reddit and we said, hey, there's parity in these one-handed weapon speeds. Is the Warhammer OP? And we post our little our speed stats there that we had just gathered for those one-handed weapons. This is something I felt in game. This is something other people would talk about, and this is something that reflected in the actual data. Of course, it hits like a tank. We see that in the damage. We know it's kind of stubby. We have Platyplasm's data. My windup speed, we had just figured out that, it's not even that slow. It's super draggable, but its slide attacks aren't even that slow. Like, not a gambling weapon, but you're definitely not going to lose out to a two-hander as far as speed. So let's fast forward about 6 weeks later. Torn Banner post patch notes, and can you believe it? The Warhammer got nerfed. The light and the heavy slash both get reduced by 5 damage. So we're not claiming Torn Banner took our feedback. I think, Dave, you would agree. I don't think in 6 weeks Torn Banner is going to take player feedback.
Definitely not that quick. But you're saying that like this basically confirmed like, okay, our data's got some legitimacy because those numbers line up with what our numbers were.
Exactly. So yeah, again, we're not claiming Torn Banner is looking at our feedback. I think they're literally incapable of doing that. But they were able to use their metadata. So I'm talking about Torn Banner now. They're able to look at their player use stats. They're able to look at how players are using the Warhammer. They're able to use their Torn Banner metadata for Chivalry 2 to detune it and balance the game. So yeah, just wanted to kind of point out our first kind of validation. Like, okay, we said Warhammer was OP, or we asked Reddit, do you think Warhammer's OP? And then it wasn't even 6 weeks later, Torn Banner's literally nerfing it. So it was great validation. It was a way to tell us that our data was at least capable of pointing out these outliers, that these anomalies or these unique weapons were there. One more thing before we get to the more modern recent data mine stuff, which is really accelerated in the last few weeks. But we wanted to talk about Polehammer Poster, who is our chat GPT. I always mix up the P and the T, but it's chat GPT Reddit bot. And
so what exactly is this?
It is a Reddit bot that responds to... Great question, Dave. I'm kind of going into details without telling us.
Yeah. What is this like at all?
So if you're on Reddit and you ask for a weapon comparison, Polehammer Poster gets in there, and he gives you weapon stats pulled from Polehammer.net. And so if you are comparing weapons just in conversation, I don't think he'll chime in. He used to, but we've kind of like tightened the collar on him. But now if you call him by name, write Polehammer Poster out, or specifically ask to compare weapons, he will run tables for you. He will actually do analysis sometimes. And sometimes the numbers are flat out wrong. Like sometimes he's misquoting, he's pulling data from the wrong area. But yeah, the tables can kind of be misleading. But when he gives advice, it's typically good advice. we should have pulled more specific examples, but like honestly, we could talk about Pullhammer Poster as a whole other episode, a whole other hour on him, because just his development in the last month and a half has been insane. His capability to disseminate the data and then to like actually talk about like meta strategy is really surprising.
We've gone on and on about the inspiration and the original labor that went into making the very rudimentary version of pullhammer.net, but
Right.
recently, right, apparently the information on pullhammer.net has become increasingly accurate by virtue of having actual data surrounding the weapons from the game files directly. So how exactly did you acquire data surrounding the weapons?
Yeah, so spoiler alert, we have the weapon data directly from the game. It is perfect data. It is the data that the game uses, which has always been the goal. We're going to get to how we got there. So, and then we'll talk about what that data means. But the way this started, and this was literally just a month ago, so we're talking mid-May. This guy named Gimmick posts on Reddit, shivstats.xyz, and this is like the first other website we've seen related to Chivalry 2. Jacob, if you could pull up shivstats.xyz. And it is kind of what it looks like. It gives you the global rank and then the experience value. I think that value is just your experience in that weapon. For every weapon, for every player, the way that caching and parsing works, Jacob could probably get more technical on this, but the way that works kind of limits players that haven't played in a long time. I don't think their data gets updated or even displayed here. So if you haven't logged in for 6 months or a year, you probably won't find yourself here if I understand how it works correctly.
Yeah,
But
more Pullhammer, or sorry, more Torn Banner sucks type content for the reason why they're
right.
interested.
But yeah, we went to Gimmick because we saw this badass website, and we were like, dude, let us help you. Like, you can see the UI is not perfect yet; it's kind of just raw, but we wanted to help. Gimmick is just like into in that chat to him. Hey man, let's help you with your website. Just like offhandedly, like real casually, like we're signing off for the night. He's like, yeah man, I appreciate your help. We're gonna set up a Discord. We're gonna do this. He's just like, man, did you ever think about taking the stats from the assets? I was like, well, yeah. I mean, that's. I mean, I've gone to the modding Discord. I've gone to Reddit. I've asked multiple platforms, multiple ways, multiple times. Like, hey, can someone help us get to the weapon data? Can we actually farm this and have real weapon data? And I think it was like the next day. I don't know. It's in that same chat. He just sends me the file of all. I think it's 34 original released weapons and all of their stats. And there's categories in there. I don't even know what they are. There's like entire columns of data here that we don't know where they are. And this came to us as raw code, and we had to convert it to a spreadsheet. But it is just so much. And we'll talk more about that at the end and us needing help with that. But we kind of pulled aside the veil for the first time. This was literally the culmination of a 2-year effort to get someone's attention, to get some help, to get to the actual data. So I literally just like paced around the house that day. I was so excited. I know it seems ridiculous that someone would get that excited about weapon stats in a game, but if anybody were going to do it, it's me. And this felt like victory after a 2-year push up this mountain.
Yeah, so it's very interesting now because you guys have the rep of being a community driven labor of love while also having the accuracy of the in game stats.
Right. So before where there was like, yeah, before where it was just like all the effort and then kind of like, kind of hack together methods and like questionable data and like, how biased is this guy? Like now it's like, no. We're showing you the actual stats now. So we just had these day one files. Like Gimmick was pretty good at getting around where we needed to explore to find this stuff, but we didn't have the most recent stuff, and we didn't want to post the weapons as they were 2 years ago, before all the nerfs and buffs, before we had Highland Rapier, Quarterstaff, Guitar, Cavalry Sword. Cavalry Sword had just come out. We didn't want to do that. So just like a week after that, like we're still talking May. We're just talking last month, a couple weeks ago. This guy named Nylanth posts his Chivalry 2 Deep Stats site. Jacob, if you want to show that off, he's good at UI. Like this guy is doing some pretty cool graphics. Like not necessarily
Definitely
on your
pretty
tier,
cool.
not necessarily as cool as your radar charts, but you see what he's going for here. Like I kind of see what you were trying to do and what this guy's trying to do.
No, this
as
looks
having
awesome.
some crossover. So the idea is that, Jacob, if you'll go to the top, I think you go, and I could be botching this. We might need Nylant to jump in a comment and tell us about this later. But I think what you do is you go into your game's configuration files, you pull out your player flavor stat file, and you plug it in here, and it runs for you, and it tells you your positions in all these modes, and how many matches won, and all your stats, and all that stuff people are always screenshotting to Reddit, but on a much better breakdown. And then it would give us these weapon breakdowns, which I also think would be wrong. It would be like the in-game weapon breakdown where it tries to tell you you've got like a 30 KD with the
Yeah.
Highland
So
sword or
could you give us an
something.
example?
Well, we don't have this figured out quite yet.
Okay.
So we just wanted to showcase it. But having seen your radar chart project and then this, like I see like if we could make that reactive, that'd be so cool. Anyways, really cool project, really caught our eye, and we saw synergy between this and Gimmicks shivstats.xyz as well. Like, it's kind of player stat related. It's just not necessarily about the experience and levels. It's more about the matches won, the overall KD and junk like that. So we wanted to get this Nihilanth, butchering his name. It's Nihilianth. We wanted to get him involved. And invited him in the same way we did Gimmick. Hey man, like your website's sweet. I want you to work with us. Join this Discord. And this dude, we'd already seen these files, and he rolls in with the most recent patch. It's got the Cavalry sword on there. Again, it's just entirely overwhelming. But now it's got all 39 weapons, the 34 base and the 5 DLC, if I'm counting right. I'm not counting Warbow. But it's got it all. Now we have to integrate it, which honestly took us a week or two. But that's how we got to where we were. But
Tell me about the actual features of Pullhammer, and why all these different methods of visualization are necessary for the data at all.
absolutely. So now that we have all this perfect data, and really the big categories that were added from this data that was mined, again, just like a month ago. We're talking a couple weeks ago we got our hands on this.
Also, toggle
Now,
the dark mode before I go blind.
yeah. This was actually the most requested feature when we launched the website. Like I showed this to a guy at work that just like casually played, and this guy looked me dead in the eye, like so serious. He's like, "Man, if you don't add a dark mode, people aren't going to use this." He was just so serious. He was so serious. It was literally our first piece of feedback about the UI. Yeah, the big breakout piece from all this new perfect data that we have is windup isn't this weird method anymore. Now we've got the actual windup speed, actual release window, actual recovery phase, the actual combo. There's all these other columns that we don't understand. Holding, riposte. There's this thwack value, THWACK, that we don't understand. So now, wind up. You can tell how long it takes to get an attack out. Release, you can tell how long that attack box stays active. Recovery, if you whiff an attack, you don't swing into the ground and you leave yourself open, that's how long you're vulnerable. And then we're going to come back to combo, because that's a whole other discussion on how we're going to factor in combo in the future. Let's look at this first example. And Dave, you had a question there originally about averages.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, in general, the website emphasizes averages for the stats that are selected by default rather than individual stats. For example, slash, overhead, stab as separate entities. Why might a player care about averages to the point where that belongs as the default, selection instead of individual attacks?
Let's do the trick, Jacob, where we just do all weapons in all categories, and this is our biblical depiction of an angel. This is if you go see
be not
God, this
afraid.
yes, this is who takes you to heaven. Is this guy here? Um, so when you load up the website, I mean, if this was the first thing you saw, it's like, man, we got all these weapons, we got all this data. Look at all this. Like, what do you do with that? Okay, go look at like the tables or the bar graphs. Just just ludicrous, right?
Yeah, I think there may be a
And,
few bugs.
and so the that's why for from a data standpoint, from
I
that side of
see.
it, we want to do averages. But there are also analysis player driven reasons to want to look at averages. Let's start with averages. So let's do Mace versus Morningstar, and let's do just averages. And this was something from our original discussion, Dave, where you were talking about, well, now we can tell the difference between the Mace and the Morningstar. We sure as hell can. So just load up averages. Look at the lines that are outside the lines of the other weapon. So I think, what do we got here? It's just the windup and the combo time. And so we were able to see that from averages. Now we know the Mace and the Morningstar are different. They have different windup times and they have different combo times. So now let's isolate that. Let's look at just the windup and the combo time. And let's look at it per attack. Let's look at stab, overhead, slash.
Yeah. So
Right.
there, if you switch to look at all windups, you can see that where the difference is on the stab. Then we
Perfect.
can look at a whole stab attack as a whole. Now you can see what attack is actually different. That sets them apart.
And we can
So,
see the disparity using
right,
these visualizers.
right. And if we were to go look at the table, you'll see, and I like tables, but not a lot of people like them.
Yeah,
But
I think when comparing, like, let's say two weapons, by themselves, I believe that this table is actually much more efficient at showing me, okay, this is different, this is different. But I can see why the visualizer is so important when you start to compare more than two weapons,
yeah,
or tons and tons of stats to the point where the table starts to get cluttered.
right. Or in this case, we looked at the average, we saw that combo and windup were different, and now we're isolating the specific attacks in windup and combo that are different. Um, so that we can see, okay, it's just these two situations. It's just that the Morningstar takes a little bit longer to wind up on its stabs, but it also has a little faster combo. So you see that 0.025 difference. If you're steady throwing stabs, I don't know that you can actually perceive a difference the way combo time works. But we're still figuring out how combo time works.
Add
But
latency in there for good measure.
yeah, right. Um, but that's kind of the process. You start with an average, you see what the differences are. Okay, then we want to break that down to what specific attacks are different, why that matters. You know, if these weapons had different range, we'd be looking at like how their different range attacks match up. Uh, my favorite example, the polehammer. The polehammer slashes are kind of short and stubby, but the stab and overhead are pretty long, and that's just the kind of stuff you can see visually on screen, and then get like really specific on the attacks. Another easy example, and it might be kind of hard to distill it down where we see, but let's look at just two-handed weapons, and let's look at their windup and releases. And I want to see if we can easily identify any outliers here.
All right, so one of the problems is that right now I have some -1 columns are in here. I got to remove those. Still
So
working this out a little bit.
yeah, you can see how having too much data becomes noise. We don't even know what to do with
Most
some of this
definitely.
yet.
Okay,
But
so
yeah,
yeah, like you said, the averages act a little bit as a sort of a way to just streamline the information.
right. And so okay, so you know what I talked about earlier with the shape of a weapon? Look at the shape of that Highland sword windup, or that's Highland sword release rather. It's literally huge, and then the smallest, the green line inside of that, I'm pretty sure is the Executioner's Axe. So we're looking at that bottom left quadrant of the radar chart, and we're seeing that the Executioner's Axe has this crazy long release phase, and even more so than that, almost to like a meme level, the Highland sword has an even bigger release.
Yes, it's quite
Um,
interesting because many people perceive the Executioner Axe as having the best drags, but technically, if
It's
the Highland sword
Sword.
had a longer release window. It might have the best drags. It might not have the best dragability, but it most definitely can be dragged the longest, which is
And whatever that difference is, yeah, can you actually sort by like average release or something, Jacob?
Yeah, I just did that.
Oh, that's perfect. So Jacob just got that to work where now you'll click at the top of a column and it'll sort it, which it was not reactive like that before. So that's a really cool new feature. Yeah, let's look right there at the top. Highland Sword Executioner's Axe there as the highest average release is really well perceived in the game, right? Like Highland Sword's slow. Executioner Axe, everybody and their mom has gotten drugged by that thing multiple times. Like that tiny, whatever that is, 0.17 milliseconds, 0.017 milliseconds or whatever it is. That's the difference between you letting your guard down and starting your next attack or not. And that's why you always get drugged by the Executioner's Axe.
it's quite a large gap.
So it's just like really interesting to pull out, outliers like that. Let's demo one of the more advanced tools on the website, Jacob. So let's look at just halberd and polehammer. One of our favorite topics of discussion here. Damage, excuse me. And then let's go to our bar graph view. Yeah, just light and heavy damage averages. And so the radar is useless when you only use so many factors. And then let's demonstrate hit stop. So people always say, well, I mean, you just throw lights at the halberd and you cleave through everybody. It's true. Polehammer has hit stop. You don't get multiple targets on light. And so that's kind of what this number of targets multiplier is here to demonstrate, is that when you scale that up to 2, 3, 4, 5 targets, well, you can see that the halberd grows just kind of proportionate to the polehammer on heavies. The polehammer just does a little bit more. But when you're throwing lights, the polehammer stops growing. The polehammer does not move. The polehammer stops on hit stop.
Of course, yeah, because it'll be, it'll be prevented from going through.
But, this was something that even when polehammer.net was very early on, people were very dismissive of the weapon stats because, oh, well, you can't factor for things like hit stop. No, we can. We absolutely can. Tell me what you want. You want to do a 1v3 matchup, 1v4 matchup? How, do they block or not? You can do that comparison. And, this is a great demonstration of that hit stop argument. Polehammer does have, well, all blunt weapons have that disadvantage in 1vx, at least. Real quick sidebar. Dave, do you think that in a 1v1 situation, hit stop can be advantageous in following up to the next attack? Or do you think that's not really a factor?
Most certainly. I think that it can be. If you're talking in like a 1v3, I'd rather not have it. But if you're talking in like a 1v2, I can totally see how it can enable some very interesting plays and be beneficial.
Yeah, and this is a shout out to you, Dave. You are officially a polehammer.net contributor. You let us know, I think it was in our metagame analysis, that, hey, that horseback damage thing you've had in the game, or you've had on the website rather,
that no one uses.
Yeah, that Tunisian update feature that was added a year ago? Well, it's always been wrong. Like, literally, for the last year on polehammer.net, the horseback damage defaults to 0, which Dave corrected us. Apparently, when you're stationary on horseback, you actually get a negative 25% damage multiplier up to.
Yeah, this is the thing that I was most surprised for when I tried to make my video All Things Cavalry. I just decided to test the damage stationary to get a clip of it. And then it said like a way lower than the base damage of the attack. I'm like, what the heck's going on? Is my game busted? Did I hit his legs by accident somehow? And nope, it just does minus 25% damage whenever you hit someone when not moving on horseback for no particular reason. Well, the more accurate way that it is done is it's actually quite complex where, like, let's say you are moving towards the enemy and the enemy is moving towards you. Then that counts as a downside towards your momentum.
See, there's a lot more going on there that anybody's really perceiving, for sure.
So if you're going at like a canter, and then the enemy is running at you full speed, your damage will probably actually go down, not up.
See, that's stuff that is not known. It's just not. The game doesn't explain it. The Torn Banner definitely hasn't explained it.
No, yes, that's why if you attack someone when they're running away, you'll do less damage than if they're running towards you. Because you're like losing momentum against them. You're not pushing. If you've ever punched a wolf, something, like the force that it pushes back against you allows you to punch harder, and so
Right.
that is
Well, that's
kind of
good
how it works.
stuff. And that's why we need. I mean, uh, we need people from all corners of the community because that's the kind of stuff. I know another YouTuber has come in and like given us dropped some knowledge on us before. You know, people like Nihilianth and Gimmick, who just on their own accord go out and start these projects. You know, we need those minds. Like that's the kind of stuff we need. So we're glad to have you on board. We're glad to be able to make updates like that and like our own website just had this tool that was kind of wrong for literally since the Tunisian update. So really easy fix. You got to know. You got to have that expertise. So
And that's
uh,
how community projects like these improve, through everyone helping each other out and giving that feedback that's necessary. So some
without
people might see an inaccuracy or a blemish as like kind of discrediting the entire project, but it
right,
kind of requires everyone pointing all of that out for it to improve.
right,
Right.
and that's kind of always been a part of pullhammer.net is even when you go look at our old legacy credits from when the website was set up a year ago, when we just had I don't know a half dozen, 7 or 8 contributors. It's always been a community thing. It's always been pieces. You know, I've had people come and audit our spreadsheets. I've had before throne damage was easily pulled from the data. You know, people would these two guys went and just ran this whole clinic just throwing stuff at each other. I imagine for tens of hours to provide us all these thrown damage values. So
Hilarious.
it's definitely a labor of love, and I represent a tiny little portion of the actual contribution. And even even the data I contributed is just totally obsolete now. So I just want to put all the credit back on the community. I'm literally the guy that likes to meme it. I'm the guy that likes to you know, get people together and talk about it, get people excited about it. But it is the community's baby, 1,000%. And without going too far down the rabbit hole, I just want to point out Chivalry 1, Age of Chivalry, going all the way back, these were mods. I mean, it was a community labor of love from the beginning, and then it kind of became corporatized, and that's great because we have this literally unbeatable combat system and these incredible assets and literally the best sound design I've ever heard in a multiplayer game. And then we just kind of have this lack of support from definitely the competitive side and definitely from
Yeah, it's very interesting because in their last game they gave you specific values. I remember in Mirage they actually told you the exact cast time of spells down to the millisecond. Be like cast time 0.85 seconds. I'm like, what?
if you played an RPG, especially any kind of PvP anything, you're literally running calculators. Like I can't help but think about like Leroy Jenkins. Like literally that meme starts with them running probability calculations on their raid going well or not. And so I'm
Yeah,
like,
and
this is
it's not that you have to play like that, but it's that for the people who want the information or the option, it's nice to have. And
right.
like I said, it's especially important in this game because they give you literally no information whatsoever. If you want to know the basic of how much damage does this attack do, you cannot find that out without testing it in game. And that's silly.
Right.
You should be able to look at
Right.
some basic damage and speed stats and at least have the bars be correct. So that's why this is so important.
Yeah, and there's a lot of kind of ancillary, I won't even call them ancillary, other projects that are just as valid, like ship stats, like the deep stat page we showed you. We have a future project that we're working on. We have bought cracktie.me, also known as the Cracktime project.
Crack
We
time
are working,
project.
yes, we are working to not just decipher how these timing categories line up. There's this holding, there's this wind up, there's a release. Where does the combo fit in? This is all theoretical. So if you're seeing this and you're cringing and you think this is wrong, please come tell us. Please come talk to us about how you think these different attack phases work into each other. And what we're working towards is how combo works, what those windows are, how riposte windows work, how gambling works, down to the weapons timing and its matchups to other weapons. And it's kind of an ambitious project. The short goal is just determining exactly how these phases interact. We want to be able to say like if I wanted to sit down and like add these things up and figure out how long it took to like throw out the perfectly fainted triple overhead or something, I could do it. If you wanted to figure out what you could get away with countering, long counter windows or a specifically short gambling window that you have one weapon versus the other, you could figure that out. But
Like, what's your gambling reaction time window specifically?
right, like how long do you have to react or how long do you have to counter? All of that should be stuff we can figure out now. So we want to get where we understand the data enough where we can start doing analysis like that. But the stretch goal is to make it a reactive calculator with visual models. We want it to be, but it would be a tool that reacted to what you selected, what weapons, what phases, what attack inputs, and it would kind of show us in real time, and perhaps even side by side, weapon versus weapon, what these attacks look like. Yeah, that's kind of the stretch goal. That's kind of the pipe dream that like we got to a point where we've got like a visualization on screen of these attacks in their actual real time. So that's a stretch goal. Cracktie.me, Crack Time Project. If you want to join the Discord, we're working on that. We'll get to that later. Just other mentions here, and I'm sure we'll post the Discord link somewhere. But Gimmick has asked for front-end support for shivstats.xyz. So if that's something you enjoy, jump in there and help him. Our guy Nihilianth, and again, I'm so sorry for butchering your name. He's been working on I know there's an SDK out there, but he's been working on another SDK. I won't pretend to know enough about it to say it's better. I just know it's different, and he's working on some specific tools for it, make it easier for us to do what we do. So jump in there and help Nihilianth with his SDK, or help Gimmick pretty up Shiv stats. And I've said it multiple times now, the PoleHammer.net team needs help deciphering all this new data. It's too much. There are literally columns and categories that we just don't even know how to put on the website. It just turns into noise.
So I have an example of that pulled up right now. Like, we just found out about repose data, and like half of these columns are -1 and 0. Like, what does that mean? We also have all this thwack data that's not live yet, which is a bunch more junk that we just have no idea what it is, and we really need some help. And we know thwack has something to do with hit stop, and repose has something to do with performing a repose. Like, that's it. That's where we're at.
And Jacob showed the GitHub there. I mean, that's how PoleHammer's always existed. It's open source, it's a community project. That GitHub link has always been there. So if you have something to contribute, or if you have something to tweak or change, you can literally go do a pull request on our GitHub, and we will look at it. And if it's not nefarious, if you're not trolling us, it will go on the website. Yeah, just a call to action there. I had one more little part I wanted to go through, and again, we wanted to thank you for that contribution on correcting the horseback calculator.
Yeah,
Dave.
no problem.
Another conversation we kind of had ongoing in our meta game analysis sub chat there in Discord was just the importance of stamina damage. When you put your 100 or 500 or 1,000 hours into the game, you're able to perfectly mirror people. You're catching all the feints. You're getting all the counters and the riposts. They're having to like drag to your ankles and like throw weird triples and do 360s and stuff. They're having to get really creative with the animation manipulation to hit you. And so the game comes down to stamina, and that's kind of what you were telling us is the most important factor if you're in a high level competitive duel. Is
yes, in competitive
you're
duels,
get
stamina
outspammed.
damage is extremely important, if not the most important deciding factor in the duel. And the stamina game of your weapon. Stamina game meaning, like your ability to maintain stamina over their weapon's ability to maintain stamina. And it's why all the weapons that have the best stamina damage or stamina drain negation, or best tools to maintain your stamina, are the ones that are the best in a duel.
And that's kind of where we want to go forward with on analysis. We have stamina data. A lot of it's kind of samey. There's kind of just a few outliers, like our heavy mace that has like the increased stamina damage negation, things like that. And for the most part, like stamina damage kind of just scales with the weapon damage. So it doesn't really feel like its own stat, but it is. And so we kind of want to take that into the fold as we do further analysis. It's the next major metric we want to put up on the website to where, we've got metrics in there we don't really get, but stamina is something we do understand. And even if a lot of the damage numbers are kind of just proportionate to the actual damage, stam damage and regular damage, it's still going to be important when we're doing kind of like a deep dive analysis on, when you consider stamina, heavy mace is actually better than pole hammer at that level. When you're not, getting easy hits on an opponent, it's all about the stamina management there at the high level from what you've explained, anyways. And
Definitely.
mess around in 1v1 servers. There's nothing more fun than just throwing like heavy, special, drop their weapon, special. Like people don't know what to do when you start stam damaging them out sometimes. So when you get a couple of heavies in, it's really effective even casually. It's really fun to stam damage people to death. So we want to flesh that out in the data set. We want to make sure that is considered in future analysis. And a lot of, and this kind of gets into the final point, the whole pole hammer meme. I think my original.
Yeah, tell me why it's called polehammer.net.
So going back to like way back at the beginning, just kind of wanting to suss out interest, trying to get people riled up. I think my first Reddit post is something really inflammatory. I'm trying to find the headline, but it's literally like, I came here to tell you all the polehammer is the best weapon in the game, or, oh, here it is. Daily reminder, the polehammer is the best weapon in the game. This was like a post from July of 2021, 2 years ago. And a lot of headlines are like that. It's literally just, unashamedly, this is the best weapon in the game. Look at this table, or look at this chart, or whatever it is, and trying to start that conversation. And people don't get it and get mad and really want to fight about it. I love arguing for the polehammer. There's a lot of strong stats that you could make it, you could argue that it is the best in a lot of ways, but ultimately the polehammer is best meme has always been about interest in weapon stats and weapon stat analysis, and more than what the game gives us and more than what the Torn Banner gave us, what the community deserves as far as a meta understanding of how the weapons work. So polehammer, it's really easy to rank high in a lot of comparative analysis. You want to throw a percentile at it, you want to throw a rank at it, you want to throw an average at it, you want to look at just the high level of it. It always ranks really high. So that's why it's easy to do that, and that's why it's easy to kind of perpetuate that meme. But ultimately, just want to put it out there, the best weapon is your favorite weapon. Whatever you like playing with. You're not going to convince people otherwise. Some skins are way more badass than the others.
So the katars are the best weapon?
For you, Dave, I mean, look how far you went in that tournament, man. I mean, to those guys, you were the best guitar player they played.
The knife is the best weapon in the game?
Okay, no one likes playing with knife. Like, show me the knife. Like, people will play with just their light shield.
There's gonna be one guy in the comments like, "Oh, I use the knife and it's amazing."
Oh yeah. Yeah, we could go find him on shivstats.xyz, the #1 knife player in the world. Yeah, I just want to put that out there. It's the one you enjoy playing with. Like, dude, I'll just go brain dead mode sometimes, or I'll be on a phone call or something. I'll pick up that Dane Axe and I'll just go swing on people. And it is just so brain dead. It's so easy. It's so fun. I will always love Dane Axe. I will always love chunking it at people. It's the weapon that you like is the one you should play. And really, the purpose of the website is to clear up misconceptions. I'm sorry if you loved the two-handed hammer and you've got the coolest skin for it, and you're a top 10 two-handed hammer player. I don't think you should stop playing it. I think you've got a niche, and it's slightly different values give you an advantage, perhaps. But like the heavy mace is better, and maybe if you picked up the heavy mace and you tried it, you might like it more. And that's kind of the end that all these means lead us to. Is I want people to play their favorite weapon. I want them to go find their new favorite weapon using the website, and you don't even have to compare weapons. You can do an analysis on just your weapon's attacks. Which ones are longest?
Of course, just
Which ones are
understanding your
strongest?
own weapon better, it definitely
Right.
helps.
What's your fastest option to stop somebody? Like, is your stab your fastest option to, get an attack out versus your overhead, which is considerably longer windup? What's my longest range weapon for this guy that's coming at me with a spear, or my longest range attack rather? Yeah. Whether you're looking at, your specific weapon or you're looking at comparable weapons, that's the core function. We had to distill this down to just like a 10-second blurb. That's what pullhammer.net is for. Go look at your favorite weapons, see how they compare to other weapons, and more importantly, like, find out what makes your weapon good. Why do you like it? What sets it apart? I could go on for a long time about that, but
Of course.
I just wanted to kind of explain that it's never been nefarious. It's never been about oh, everyone should play Pullhammer because I say it's the best. It's more about I got your attention. Now come look. Let's talk about it.
Yes. To conclude,
Um,
this is an incredibly helpful tool when it comes to weapon analysis and understanding how the game works in its attack range, combo speed, wind up speed, release window. Pretty much every aspect about a weapon that you would want to see is here in a plethora of different visualization methods and analysis in different situations like 1vx, or even if you're using the weapon on a horse. So there's really
Absolutely.
nothing to be
Very
lost
specific.
here, and anything that is lost, you're begging to hear feedback on it so you can add it.
Exactly. We want people to tell us we're wrong. We want people to tell us where to fix things. Yeah, absolutely. It's a community project. Come be part of the community. We're gonna throw up. I'm sure we'll throw up the Discord link on the YouTube eventually. But come join us. Come look at the data files yourself. Come look at them raw. Come mine your own. We just we want to perpetuate the Chivalry 2 community, and noobs coming in
Yep.
and having a bad experience with bad data doesn't help that. Pros working off bad data doesn't help that. So
And with that,
um,
to end it off there, like, we've had to deal with inaccurate information, or a lack of information, more accurately, for 2 years. The better part of
yes,
this game's life, most likely. And now, after all this time, we finally have a legitimate, trustworthy, and working resource that we can go to and that we can reference when making our decisions in game and actually playing it at a high level. And I'm extremely thankful for that, which is mainly
well,
why
we
I wanted to
appreciate
have
it.
this talk.
Absolutely. No, and having someone that comes from your corner of the community and is able to give us insight uh, from a perspective that we just don't really consider, um, that's huge. We need more Solder Daves in the server. We need more gimmicks. We need more Nihilants. We even need other angry YouTubers to come get in there and tell us why we're wrong and help us fix things. So, um, yeah, I really appreciate the platform, Dave. Jacob, I appreciate you running the platform. Biggest shout out for anything related to pullhammer.net, anything related to Pullhammer Poster. Jacob is the actual Wizard of Oz. He's the one behind the curtain. He he literally does everything technical. So I get to go argue with people on Reddit, and I go get to start shit, and just kind of farm salt in the name of getting attention for uh, the website and data gathering and all that. And Jacob's the one, making Pullhammer Poster a stat genius and updating the website. Those reactive column sortings, that was something he literally added like 2 days ago. It's just constantly a labor of love. So big shout out to Jacob. And thanks
Yeah.
again, Dave.
No
And
problem.
I want to shout out Aardvark just one more time because I am not good at making websites. If there wasn't a base to get started with, I would have never gone this far with it. So without him, it would have never happened. So
And then again, that's Aardvark, who gave us that very first version of the website, and who I don't even think he's involved anymore with Chivalry 2, and he was the catalyst. He really set it off. So yeah, definitely worth the shout out.
All right, then.